We are now going to hand to Dr. Robert Crawhall, CEO of the Canadian Academy of Engineering, who's joining us online. So, Dr. Crawhall, I hope you can hear us, and we're handing to you.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about from the Canadian perspective, and specifically from the Canadian Academy perspective. And I want to be clear that the Academy of Engineering in Canada is an independent body. We aren't supported by the government for doing this. We aren't supported by industry. So take the things I say in this presentation as being my opinions and those of the Academy, as opposed to an official Canadian position. As you may be aware, Canada is actually in the middle of an election at the moment, so we're not even entirely sure what the official Canadian position is at this point in time. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we call our SINGS initiative, our Sustainable Intelligent Next Generation System, and how that relates to national productivity and resilience, which are two of the major themes that the Academy is working towards at this time. I'm the CEO. Catherine Karakatsanis is the president. President is the term we have for our chair. She is also chair of FIDIC, which is the international body of consulting engineers. So works with 100 companies across those. So the CAE is an independent, not-for-profit educational charity. We don't lobby. We aren't we don't provide engineering advice or advocacy, but we do try to inform. There are 990 fellows in the Academy. So our mission is to recognize outstanding contributions to engineering in Canada and to bring an engineering perspective to major policy initiatives such as telecommunications and 6G. And the four major projects that we're working on at the moment, Future Networks, also on mega project management, a place where we've collaborated with the Royal Academy of Engineering, resilient ultra-low energy building to do with the housing crisis, and energy scenarios past 2040, which is something we're doing with the International Council of Academies of Engineering, and we're leading that with about 20 other academies. So for us, the 6G and 6G NTN initiative falls under the heading of Canadian digitization. We are really looking at future networks as a foundation for our digitization strategy. I think you'll all recognize the key points that I've listed under there. By all means, ask me any questions as I go through this. Within 10 minutes, I'm sort of going to go through it rather quickly, and also because what I want to highlight is what are similarities and differences, perhaps from a Canadian perspective, to that of the other participants in the conference. Future networks, we often get bogged down in the technical details. I've been in telecommunications for the better part of my 40 years as an engineer, but it is also sometimes underappreciated as a foundation for industrial productivity. And so that makes up an important part of why we're working on this. And also, of course, for social and economic well-being around healthcare, education, personal mobility, and the digital economy. And in the next few charts, I hope to give you a little bit of the flavor of why in Canada, particularly going forward, telecom has played a vital role in the development of Canada in the past, but why it's going to play such an important role going forward. So recently a report came out from BCG that highlighted really the 6 major challenges that we have in the Canadian economy around investment, energy transition, AI, core and social infrastructure, inclusive growth, and resiliency. And I think those are priorities with some flavor shifts for most countries, developed or developing at the moment. Where Canada is a little unusual, and we do have a few colleagues in Australia and a few other places that are similar, is some of our unique geographic challenges and how that relates to the costs of deploying telecommunications and the resiliency aspects. I like this chart. It's interesting. 4 different colors each representing a quarter of the Canadian population. And you'll see in the circle down at the bottom of the chart is a quarter of the population. That's where I live. That's where many people live. And then we've got the two areas that are along the US border, one in the west, one in the east. And then all the rest of the country is another quarter of the population. This has a number of implications. One of them was we have just, as everybody is looking at their military deployments at the moment, just announced 3 major expansions. And you will see those are well away from the population centers. Those are in towns called Whitehorse, Iqaluit, and Yellowknife. The other thing, which is probably a little unusual for most of the people attending this conference, is the actual cellular coverage over the Canadian territory. Just as a, by the way, the water body sort of in the middle of Canada there is Hudson's Bay, and the UK fits comfortably into there. But you'll see that again, these are just 2 of our major companies. I haven't bothered to name them, but they have a rather similar distribution, and you'll see there's a lot of the country that does not have full cellular coverage. And if you look at the fiber coverage, it's fairly similar. The problem comes when, so for instance, the political parties at the moment are talking about critical minerals. There's a lot of economic uncertainty. Critical minerals are important. I apologize if you can hear the dogs barking in the background. But of course, the critical minerals aren't where the people are. And so you'll see here that a lot of economic development will be happening well into the north, where we're underserved by the telecommunications infrastructure. Clean energy production is another one. We're very fortunate in Canada to have great hydroelectric resources, solar, wind, but again, not really where the population is. And then finally, we have this issue of population growth. And obviously, it's easy to grow population where population is low, but much of the population growth projected for the next number of years, particularly in areas of the country that are over 40% indigenous in population, have a higher rate of population growth than in the more populated South, which puts then demand on telecommunications infrastructure. So this is the background to why we thought that the SINGS initiative was so important. We got into it in March of 2022 after discussions with our colleagues at the National Academy of Engineering in the US when they launched their RINGS initiative, driven by many of the same issues, plus these additional Canadian ones. And part of the challenge for us in Canada is we wanted to make sure that we were articulating a strong vision for Canada that a series of smaller companies and independent researchers could align with. And this is something similar to what we did with internet back in the 90s and a number of other groups. So the 4 pillars of SINGS, I think, are common to most people. The 4 pillars around accessibility, trustworthiness, intelligence, and sustainability. You'll see the rural, remote, far north, and coastal under accessibility. And there are actually many grades of that. And also very important how we bring education and healthcare northward. Trustworthiness, cybersecurity, important for everybody, particularly on a highly distributed network the way we have. And then Canada has made major commitments in our policy to the areas of AI and quantum. And so how does that integrate into our network vision? And finally, and it almost seems in the last few months that sustainability has taken a step back, but it hasn't gone anywhere. We have all of the issues around energy efficiency, data centers, building towards the circular economy, where the renewable energy I've already talked about, and how we reduce the carbon footprint. which also gets back to the resilience issue that if we don't reduce the carbon footprint fast enough, then we need to have better strategies for resilience. So that brings us to this diagram, which again, I'm assuming is familiar to everybody. It is really important in Canada that as we develop a 6G vision, it is integrated with an NTN vision. And I would say that understanding is becoming more common globally. We were there quite early in the 6G discussion because of the things I've explained. And I'm hoping that with the progress that's being made at 3GPP and other standards bodies, that this is now becoming a central tenet of the 6G story. The future networks and AI, really important. There's a lot of work going on. I've just highlighted Canada is a partner in the, I think it's 5-country GCOT, the Global Collaboration on Telecommunications, and they just came out with at the beginning of this year with a statement on AI and networks. And in our parlance, we have networks for AI and AI for networks. And these are two different initiatives, but are closely related. So starting in 2022, we kicked off with an international workshop, very well represented. That continued into 2023 with an industry validation of the directions we were going in and the principles and pillars. We've participated in the workshops on 6G and future wireless, Stockholm, Glasgow, New Delhi, and now today here in Cambridge. So other things that have happened just in sort of recent past, the Canadian government has announced an extension of the CENGEN program, which is a Center of Excellence in Next Generation Networking, putting 8 living labs across the country, built largely on 5G, but moving towards 6. We've got a strong Canadian legacy in terrestrial, mobile, and non-terrestrial networks going back kind of to the beginning. And I think that is probably closer together today than it has been in a couple of decades. The Telesat Lightspeed program, which is the LEO orbits by the Canadian company Telesat, is announced, funded, should have the first birds up in 2026. I've referred to the 3GPP exercise, which we're very supportive of, and we're hoping to have, or in discussions about, a pan-Canadian workshop on 6G and NTN, which will probably become clearer once we're through the election period. So just in summary, the future network framework objectives, we want to make sure that the framework we put out exemplifies intelligence, trust, accessibility, and sustainability, that it allows individual researchers, companies, to focus on parts of a holistic structure to make research dollars and company investments more efficient, that we are going to leverage the emerging technologies in AI, quantum, semiconductors, and find a way to massively reduce the energy consumption associated with all the various elements of digitization. Data-driven, low latency and resiliency. Returning to the idea that this telecommunications infrastructure is critical infrastructure, and to embrace the principles of universal access, and to support a Canadian voice at the international table.